Hello, friends. Let me put this in gallery view so that we're side by side. And Doug, you and I have known each other for a dozen years. I think we first met because we're both members of Denver Rotary. So we met about
Right.
that time, and you had become president in 2007 of the Denver Rotary Club. And I've just always admired what you've done. And Project
Thank you.
C.U.R.E, your organization, Project C.U.R.E, saves lives for people around the world. Um, so, could you maybe share with our audience what Project C.U.R.E is and what you do under normal
Sure.
circumstances?
Right. Well, you're a good friend, and I always appreciate your kindness and your support and your mentorship, and really excited for your new venture with Vistage, and just proud of you, man. Things are going great. So this is
Thank you,
really
Doug.
fun.
Thank you.
It's fun to participate with you here too. So
Thank you.
yeah, Project Cure. So Project Cure is a little family experiment that got started on my mom and dad's garage in 1987, and has now grown to where they tell me we're the largest in the world doing what we do. And what we do is to collect and distribute donated medical supplies and equipment into developing countries. And there's a couple ways to measure size. One is by volume, how many of those huge 40-foot shipping containers, they look like semi-truck trailers you move every year. And the other one is by dollar value. Since we don't do a lot of pharmaceutical, our dollar value is not quite as high as if we were shipping, antibiotics and antiretrovirals and all of that. But I can tell you that this year we will deliver over 200 semi-truck trailers of medical supplies and equipment into
Wow.
communities all over the world. Statistically, half the world's population lives on $5 a day. You get your mind around 3 billion people who work hard. It's not that they're lazy. They're out working 12 hours a day and they make $5.
Mm-hmm.
The 1.2 billion people live on $1 a day.
Yes.
And when you're that poor, you just can't afford health care. And so, for a mom to go in and have a baby, and she's hemorrhaging, she needs sutures, she needs gloves, she needs some things like that. And the doctors and nurses just don't have them. And so the ultimate outcome is that mom just doesn't make it. And, the same can be said of babies. The same can be said of dads. I mean, all the people when you go to Africa, they're riding around on these boda motorcycles, and man, I've seen some unbelievable crashes. And if there's not somebody there to help and there's not medical supplies, those guys don't make it either. So that's what we're really trying to do is to help change the world by providing the things that these people need to live another day.
About the time we met, I read a book by Charles Collier called The Bottom Billion. And I
Yep.
wouldn't be at all surprised that you've read it as well. You read more than anyone I know. And that's what gave me the reason for heading down this path and now co chairing with Blair the World Community Service Committee for the Denver Rotary Club. And yeah, and I think it's 2 billion live on less than $2 a day, isn't it? Something like
Right.
that. I mean, we
Yeah.
we need to be involved, and certainly Bill Gates has done tremendous work. Bill and Melinda Gates have done
Hmm.
tremendous work in this area and shined a light on it. So yeah, but you had to make a pivot here earlier this year, as did all of us. And so, how did it impact you guys?
Well, it was interesting because we had just come off of, and I can back up into January. We started getting requests from our international partners, particularly in Asia, for PPE, and we shipped well over 100,000 N95 masks and things like that, not thinking that it was ever going to come to the United States, at least not like it did. I mean, I've been through Asian flu, H1N1, Ebola, SARS, MERS. I've seen all of that stuff, and I had no reason to believe that this was going to be any different. And so, January, February, we were shipping personal protective equipment over there, and then it was the 10th of March, we did a women's event in Nashville. Project C.U.R.E has 7 big distribution warehouses. These are 50,000 square feet plus. And it's Denver, Phoenix, Nashville, Houston, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Kansas City now. So we were in Nashville doing a celebration of International Women's Day. And, they kept talking about this thing called COVID-19. And we had a team, Project C.U.R.E had a team of doctors and nurses working in the Ivory Coast. I had one of my staff that was in Kenya and Ghana on her way back to the United States. And, in January, she decided that she wanted to stop in Paris for 3 or 4 days and just take a long weekend and kind of rest and relax. And I'm watching all of this stuff and was really concerned about all it. So we pulled our teams back home. It ended up that my colleague that was in Paris ended up getting COVID on her way through Paris.
Wow.
And was very, very sick for, the better part of 2 weeks when she got home. And that's a whole nother story. But anyway, so rather than go to Washington, D.C., and then it was supposed to be Chicago after that, and we just made the decision, let's just pull ourselves off the road. We'll go home for two weeks. Remember, it was supposed to be a 14-day stay-at-home thing.
Right.
And then we'll get back with life. And, here we are 5.5 months later. But the interesting thing happened when I got home. My brother, who's fire chief in Denver, called and he said, "Hey, dude, we're out of masks and gloves. Can you help us with anything?" And so we put a pallet of things together for the West Metro Fire Department here in Denver. And then we started getting calls from our nurses. Now, Project C.U.R.E will have around 30-some thousand volunteers this year. And this year actually maybe down a little bit because, we've had to sort of pull things back. But in a good year, about 30,000 volunteers. And a lot of those are nurses and doctors. And we started getting calls from these nurses in the hospitals where we were. They were out of PPE. So we went through these big warehouses of ours and we just started pulling off all the masks and the gloves and that. And we've never done domestic relief before. We turned all of that around and we started shipping that to the hospitals that usually take care of us. And when we ran out of all of that, we started doing PPE drives. And we teamed up with some of the professional sports teams and we put out a bunch of wooden gaylords out in the parking lots and people would come by, auto body shops that are using N95s and biology labs at the university that have extra gloves. And we collected, 30, 40 more pallets of stuff within, the first weekend. So, and then we just turned around and kept giving that away. I bought some, had the good fortune of not getting ripped off.
Yeah.
A lot of people did. And we've been taking care of the folks here at home.
Well, Doug, don't I recall that you had agreements in place about, when you take donations in of medical equipment that they won't be distributed here in the United States, that they're going to be sent overseas? Was that an issue?
At that point, I didn't even, some of those agreements are with the very hospitals then that were asking us for stuff. So
Yeah.
I figured, I'm not going to worry about that. The manufacturers that I know, they were trying hard to provide PPE for the hospitals that were their clients.
Yeah.
So I just figured, no, this is an emergency case. If somebody gets mad at me, let them be mad at me. We're just going to do what's right.
Yeah. It seems moot now, but I would think in the early days that might have been a concern.
Yeah, well, and we made a pretty fast decision. It took me about all of a weekend, 48 hours to decide this is the right thing to do. Let's make this happen. So
Yeah.
I honestly didn't take that much time, but that was a calculated risk.
How much of your work now has returned to normal? Because we still have kids falling off motorbikes in developing
Sure.
countries and moms who can't deliver babies adequately, and so you still have to be doing that work too.
Yeah, we're probably 2/3 international, a third domestic at this
Oh,
point.
good.
For a couple of reasons. One, the supply chain in the United States has largely caught up. We're not seeing as many, particularly the big hospitals in the urban areas.
Yeah.
They're not experiencing the shortages that they did, and that's a good thing. Most of the work that we're doing right now is with rural hospitals, and so we're working with groups like Angels Flight and the rural hospital associations to get things out into the little rural hospitals out on the eastern plains of Colorado or in Kansas or Missouri and Tennessee, places like that where they all stopped doing elective surgery. And it's funny because when people hear that, they think, oh, well, the rich people can't get nose jobs right now. That's not an elective surgery. I mean, it is, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about like knees and hips and,
Right.
hernia surgery. And I mean, people who are in a lot of pain. It's not life threatening, but they really need to get something taken care of. You
Right.
know, uh, prostate exams, right? A prostatectomy. You can't do one unless you have access to an emergency room just in case something goes wrong. Well,
Right.
emergency rooms are all set aside for COVID. Guess who's not getting their prostate biopsy done? And that's going to have some long term effects. But anyway, for the long term effect with the rural hospitals, when you shut off that cash flow and they're not attached to a big hospital chain, there's a very high likelihood that that rural hospital is going to go out of business. And so that's really what we're trying to do is take care of those, because in a lot of cases that's the only access to healthcare that some of these folks have across the United States. So that's the third of the work that we're doing.
You know,
Um,
it's, Doug, you probably never imagined you'd be heading down this path, managing this nonprofit started by your parents so many years ago. You began your life as an academic, but
right.
it sure seems like you're using every bit of that knowledge today. Is that a fair statement from
Yeah,
law to
I,
finance?
yeah, I think so. I set out to be an attorney and I practiced for a while in house for a big ag manufacturing company. A guy named Warren Buffett out in Nebraska ended up buying these guys, and but I loved the merger and acquisition world. I just thought putting these deals together was so fun. But I was so young. I was
Yeah.
23 when I passed the bar,
Yeah.
and I thought, well, I should go get some finance under my belt, and then I can go to Wall Street. We can do hedge funds, or we can do private equity, M&A.
Yeah.
So I did my dissertation on secondary leverage buyouts, management buyouts, and secondary IPOs. Right. So these are companies like Levi Strauss, Mary Kay, HCA, where they're public traded companies that go private and then they turn around and come back public again. The question was, what is it that you can do in private that you can't do if you're a publicly traded company, right? So that was my dissertation.
Yeah.
And my dad kept, bugging me to give back, give back. So I thought, well, I'll just go teach college for a while, and that will be my give back. And so I landed in San Diego for 5 years teaching college out there, which is not a charity gig when you're looking at the Pacific Ocean every day. But anyway, yeah. So that was where I thought I was headed. And when I was done, I was, done with academics. I wanted to go back and do the, finance thing, law and finance. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when my dad said, "Hey, could you help?" And I said, "Sure, I'll help." So we only had money for 6 months, and then we were going to go, off and do our own stuff and leave my dad with his nonprofit. So my friend Dave and my friend Doreen and I, we jumped in, $75,000 divided by three divided by six, and that's what we were going to do.
What? So those skills were certainly useful in running this organization, but at some point in time, you felt like you needed more. You've always been a reader, right?
Right, right,
You've been a lifelong learner, and
right.
then you joined Vistage and a Vistage group to try to build upon those managerial skills.
Hmm.
How has that helped you?
Well, it's an interesting thing, because particularly like in a nonprofit, uh, you know, it's not like you can just call your board and say, "Hey, I'm flailing.
Hmm.
I don't know what I'm doing," because they'll say, "Great, let's get somebody in here who does." And
Right.
you don't want to take a chance on that one. And so that's why I started looking for some help and some things like that. And
Was that 10 years in? You had been managing and growing Project Cure for how long?
so I've been here since '97,
Hmm.
so this is 23 years, and I've been a member of Vistage, I think, for 7 or 8 years. So
Okay.
But you know, the early days were rough. When I took over, we had 12 volunteers, and I think our top line the year before I started was $100,000.
Wow.
And now, like I said, we'll have 30 some thousand volunteers, and our top line will be 80, 85, $90 million this year. So
Hmm.
it's grown a little bit. And you know, my Vistage coach, Don Myers, he told me, he said, the problem, Doug, is that most people that start out as the $100,000 guy don't get to be the $100 million guy. You know, I guess Jeff Bezos notwithstanding, but you know,
Yeah.
he just said that that doesn't happen very often.
Right.
And I said, well, why do you think that is? And he said, you know, because he said, I think we have we do something well, and then we develop that into a sweet spot. So you have the, you know, the startup guy, or you have the sales guy, you know, that comes in and gets the company ready and sells it. But very seldom are those two people the same because you don't want to learn a new skill set. It's too
Right.
painful to change.
Right.
And that made a lot of sense to me. And so I started thinking, what am I going to have to do to be the CEO that this organization needs when we're at $500 million and not 100? And it's a completely different skill set. And
Hmm.
so if you don't have that, you need to find somebody who does to teach you, whether that's through a book.
Hmm.
Um, you know, there's some good benefit to the School of Hard Knocks, but you know, there's just we don't have that much runway. So it's a lot better to go ask somebody else who's made those mistakes
Right.
or avoided the mistakes and can teach you the lessons the second or third time down. You know, than to have to make all the mistakes yourself.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, obviously, it's been helpful.
But yeah, it's been hugely helpful, and it gives you confidence. And you know, that's the other part of it is sometimes the things that I've learned that are most beneficial is that there's no right answer, and you need to do what you think is right to do because nobody can tell you what to do. You know, I mean, there's an element to which we're all sort of struggling,
Yeah.
and some days it's just nice to walk away and say, "Wow, those are some really smart people, and they're struggling in the same thing I am." So, you know, don't feel bad and don't feel stupid. We're all getting through this as best we can. COVID being one of those things. I mean, this is a new page out of a playbook for I think everybody I know.
But it's a real opportunity for growth too, because it's exposed so many weaknesses
Hmm.
globally and within organizations, with us as individuals.
Right.
What kind of things have you been able to learn from the pandemic? How has it changed your organization?
Well, I think you know a couple of things. I like to say at this point, if you were on the bubble before COVID,
Hmm.
you're out. It's forced us uh, to say either really yes. Mark Manson wrote an article. He said it's either F yes or
Hmm.
no, but there's no
Hmm.
in the meantime, right? There's no in between. So a lot of decisions that we thought we were going to have to make before COVID, we just didn't want to make it, right? I've
Right.
talked to people who said, I hated that customer. They were a low margin customer anyway, but I kept them on because it was just too painful to break up with them and tell them to go find somebody else. Well, COVID forced you to do that. In public health, you know, we've had telemedicine around for decades. We've known that we could do this. We could do a doctor and patient visit just like we're doing now, but we didn't have to. And
Hmm.
so the government didn't put payer rules into place. The doctors didn't invest in the telemedicine technology. The patients didn't really want to. Now they do,
Right.
and it's gone from 30 billion to $900 billion business in a matter of 5 months. So there's just an awful lot of things, which makes you kind of wonder. Remember when Stephen Covey talked about the day before you go on vacation is usually your most productive day because you try to get everything done before. And he said, what if you did that every day?
Yeah. Right.
What if we would have made the hard decisions that we were making it through COVID before COVID,
Right.
right? And it really makes me wonder. how many times did I slack off and put up with mediocrity? I like to say, you may get what you pay for, but you
Right.
absolutely deserve what you tolerate. And that's, how much stuff did I tolerate that I shouldn't have been putting up with, and now I'm forced to make a change.
Right.
And so I think that was one of the things that really comes to my mind is that's kind of what it looks like.
Yeah, I'm really in awe in the number of relationships that you're managing. I've been to three of your seven facilities,
Right,
but so those are just domestic cities where you're
yeah,
managing 30,000 volunteers, and then you're managing all of the relationships in developing countries that you serve. How do you do
right.
all that? How do you do that effectively? Obviously, a team. I mean, you've got to have a team of people to help you do that. You've got to have the right tools. That's a lot on your plate.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then we've got all of the relationships with the suppliers, right? So these are all the hospitals.
Right.
We got the manufacturers, and then we've got the shipping companies. And when you go into our office, the big, most surprising thing to me is that everybody's not running around with their hair on fire. We don't yell at each other. That's part of our corporate culture. We treat each other with respect. So people come in and they look
Right.
around and it's like being in the ocean, and it looks really calm on top until you realize that there's a rip current going on underneath. And if
Yeah.
you get in
Right.
that water, it'll take you down. And so that's I tell my team, I say that the biggest compliment that I can give to you is that you make it look easy,
Right. Yeah.
and they do every day. It's amazing to me what happens the
How are
difference.
you guys communicating today? Are you on Zoom like this?
Yeah, we do a lot of Zoom. We still do some conference calling. A couple of things that happened. On Friday afternoons, I started doing an all staff call. We've only got 35 full paid staff
Right.
for 30,000 volunteers. But I started getting all of my staff together on Friday afternoon, and partly I just wanted to send them home with a little bit of confidence.
Hmm.
A lot of nonprofits have laid off 20, 30, 40, 50% of their employees. Some of them are going out of business completely.
Right.
So I would just tell them, here's how much our deposit was this week, friends. And so we now have enough in the bank for 2 more months. So go home tonight because we still have a job and everything is fine, and you can celebrate the weekend and sleep a little bit because it's gonna be okay, and we're coming back Monday. So we did that through all of those and they could ask any questions that they wanted, and some were just simple things, and some are pretty, what's going to happen to our health care insurance and that kind of stuff. But we stopped doing the Friday call and we started doing a Monday morning call because I wanted to change the focus from being retrospective to being prospective, and what do we want to get done this week. And so we still are doing those every other week with the entire organization. And then I'm directly managing our fundraising philanthropy team again. And so every Monday at 2 o'clock, we have a meeting with all the people on the philanthropy side, and we go around the horn and talk about what's happening. And I know Chris is doing that with the operations side too. So we're doing a lot more. I don't think it's possible to over communicate right now on any level.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, we're all being hit with a lot of noise. So you've
Yes.
got to break through that to
Right.
determine what's important and to communicate what's important.
Right. Well,
Hmm.
I think that's the consistency part of it, right?
Hmm.
I mean, if everything else in society is moving around, it's like you're back to that boat analogy, and the
Right.
waves are up and down, and everything else, and they tell you that the way to keep from getting sick is focus on the shore and just look at one, watch for the lighthouse and keep your eye on the lighthouse,
Right.
that kind of thing. And we want to be the lighthouse as the leaders of the organization. This is a dumb time to do anything that would augment the lack of trust. And I just, think that I've said that I think that the biggest victim of COVID right now is probably trust. Um, you know, you look at your family that you used to, love and hug and be with and laugh and everything. And
Right.
now, I talk to people who are grandparents and are like, I don't want to see my grandkids because these little kids are disease vectors. They're going to come
Right.
here sick and I might die.
Right.
Well, it's the same thing, you know. I mean, these employees are looking at their bosses and they're saying, well, do I really trust you? You know, if you get the PPP,
Right.
you pay yourself and you fire me. Is that what's going to go on? And the same thing, a lot of bosses are saying, work from home, what a joke. You know,
Hmm.
every time I call you, I can't get a hold of you and the stuff's not coming in. And it's just universally, there's just a lack of trust on everybody's part right now. And as leaders, I think we really have to talk about what are we going to do to rebuild that trust.
You know, that rebuilding trust is hugely important. But what what other what is there one big issue that keeps you up at night yet today? You kind of hinted because
Yeah,
you're focusing more time now on development. So, you know, many of the funds are being diverted because of the pandemic. So you've got your finger on that pulse. Anything
right.
else?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, long run, I think it's going to be really hard to do what we do. And I told my team, I said, if you think the pivot from international to domestic was hard,
Mm-hmm.
wait till we pivot back to international. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that a lot of people in the United States have a stomach, particularly to go help people in other countries right now.
Mm.
I think we're worried about protests, we're worried about riots, we're worried about the election, we're worried about the stock market, we're worried about layoffs, we're worried about toilet paper and tuna fish and all these other things.
Right.
And if you go in there and you say, look, you know, there's people in Honduras that are starving to death, not just about COVID, but I mean, they can't get food, they can't get medical supplies. It's like, yeah, I know, but that's Honduras. You know, we got problems in Houston, and so it's. I think it's going to be a tough road. Um,
You know, you've got a good partner in Bill Gates who's doing a tremendous job, in my opinion, of continually communicating that message that you really need to care. And back to the book that Charles Collier wrote that affected me so.
yeah,
And I think you and I especially live in a world in which, you know, being Rotarians, we have that heightened awareness for that
yeah,
need. So, but we need to communicate that message out to others, one to
right,
many, you know,
right,
as effectively as we can. There are no
yeah.
easy solutions to that.
Well, and you know, part of the thing, so I had the opportunity a few years back to spend some time with Thomas Friedman, you know, the author,
Mm-hmm.
and we were talking about things like 9/11 and some of that kind of stuff, and you know, his comment was those things stand for the proposition that if you don't visit the bad neighborhood will visit you. And
Wow.
so, you know, you think about this whole thing with COVID. Well,
Yeah.
we
Right.
didn't start it here. We didn't start Ebola here. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, you believe the story that we were all told that COVID started because people, you know, in wet markets. Well, I've been to those, and if they're eating bats and bugs and things like that, that's a problem,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
so, what do you do to intervene in those situations? Even if people didn't have an ounce of humanity in their soul for just
Right.
empathy to care for somebody else, even if
Right.
it was just total self protection,
Right.
there's a good argument to jump in and say, you know, hey, think about this from a different perspective.
Right.
We killed our economy because some guy in China ate a bat. Really?
Yeah.
That should get some people thinking about it. And then on the empathy side of things, you know, in this country, we've never had a situation where somebody said, wait a second, I can't go to the emergency room because my doctor or my nurse doesn't have masks, gowns, and gloves.
Right.
It was the unthinkable in this country. But where I work, all around the world, that's the normal state of affairs. And so part of our messaging to people is, hey, look, you didn't like it. I got it. But this is how most of the rest of the world works. And if you can sort of tap back into that emotion that says, you know, that was scary for me. I can't imagine what it would be like if that was my reality on a day-to-day basis. That's what it is. And the piece of that then is, and we can fix it and change that story. we can do something about that because we live in such a world of abundance. I remember, one of the very first weekends, we went to Costco, and the toilet paper was gone.
Right.
There was a couple of things, that they're rationing out. Batteries, I think, you can only buy a certain number of batteries or whatever. But I'm walking into this Costco, and it was full,
Hmm.
and I'm thinking, for us, this is what shortage looks like.
Right.
You walked into the grocery store, and yeah, again, the toilet paper aisle was empty, but there was plenty of other food to eat in the grocery store, and I'm thinking this isn't a scarcity thing. I mean, we still have huge abundance.
Right.
It's not in a couple of things we had supply chain issues on, but yeah.
Yeah. Look, I want to be respectful of your time. You are always very generous to me, but what, in conclusion, can I do to help you best? And by extension, then, those listening to this message, what can they do to help you be more effective?
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, one of the things that you and I share is, what are you reading?
Yeah, right.
And so, what might be kind of fun is I know that some of the folks, Tim Ferriss says this. Maybe it'd be fun for your listeners to come in and do a little private chat with you and talk about some of the stuff that we're learning and the lessons because I love learning new stuff and that would be great. And if people have great ideas, I'm open to hear them.
When we last saw each other in person at your fundraiser, you were kind enough to say, "Hey, Don and I should include you in our book club." And I said to you, "Hey, Doug, I haven't bought a physical book in I don't know how many years." And you
Right.
just looked at me, and the two of us sort of paused, and we parted. But you made me think that maybe I need, just because it's a physical manifestation, to buy the books for my groups and offer it to people. So read it, and then I can be part of your book club from that standpoint, that I'll have the book. And Colleen Stanley did just an incredible job, as you
Yeah.
know. And
Yeah.
you also said to me, "Hey, John, I bought both of her books,"
Yeah.
and there you go. I mean, that's just a great example. So anyway, I'm gonna make a pivot myself and start
Fun.
buying physical books for that reason.
Fun. Yeah. For me, I just part of it. I like the looks of it. I go upstairs into my office
Yeah,
and I've got bookcases full of cool, fun books, and they're good looking, and I've
it's a
got all
great
my Seth
reminder.
Godins over here and my Keith Ferrazzi's over here. But for me to be just the way I think, I can tell you that the Seth Godin books are smaller,
Hmm.
and I can almost take you to the page where I remember, and so we'll underline or I'll fold them over.
Yeah,
I'm not one of those ones. Bill Gates, I guess, when he writes, he writes all the things he disagrees with in the margins. And so when he's reading books, he's writing all over them and things like that.
yeah,
Dana does that. I try
right.
to keep them pristine, so I take the covers off when I read them, put the covers back on. It's just a funny thing, but just that physical, and they're saying that with the old moleskins, the notebooks, that a lot of people are going back to that because it helps them remember and think when they have the hand-eye coordination
Yeah.
and they're physically writing. So I don't know. It's however we want to do it, but it's just that that input. One of the things that I started doing is in the mornings, I read about an hour, and a lot of it is around this whole COVID thing. So
Hmm.
I got all these medical journals that I'm downloading and reading what's news on COVID, and I'm watching
Right.
some of the international stuff. And then there's a couple of sites that have really great, just short articles, 7 to 10 minute reads. And I started pulling them off and copying them into Word folders so that I can print it when I'm done with this 2020. And here's all the great articles that I read, and put a little binder on it and stick it in my library.
So I have a hint for you too, and
Yeah.
that is, Apple came out with a new Magic Keyboard now for the
Oh,
iPad.
fun.
So this
Yeah.
is my reading device,
Oh, I love that.
but now there's content creation when you have a
Oh, yeah.
keyboard and a
Yeah.
trackpad.
Yep.
So
Yep.
what it's become is sort of my portable television, and I canceled Showtime, and
Yep.
now I pay for YouTube.
Yep.
So I think for people who think YouTube is about cat videos, the world has changed. It is the greatest source of education. And so, as I said to you, I
Right.
watched your Rotary video during my lunch before you and I recorded this
Yeah.
in preparation. So there you
That's
go. I
cool.
mean, that's my
That's
tip
cool.
for you for today.
No, I love that. Well, I love watching YouTubes when I'm at the gym too. You know,
Yeah,
um, and it's just it's the greatest way to make an hour go by, and there's no commercials. You don't have to put up with reruns of anything, and so you can get on a this month I'm going to watch all Tony Robbins, or this month I'm going to watch all somebody else, and
yeah,
it's a
get
fun
on a
way to
kick.
learn.
Right,
Yeah, yeah. Stanford's got a really cool. They do a thing kind of like this. They used to do it in person. I don't know what they're doing now, but the people that they had on there, the guys who started BlackRock or
right,
Blackstone, I mean, and all of that stuff.
right.
Very very cool stuff talking about that, and yeah,
Yeah, yeah. No,
yeah.
I
So
think it's great. I mean, the opportunities that we
cool.
have available to us are extraordinary. And, I just feel gratitude every day, you know,
Yeah.
and especially for friends like you. So
Well, thank you.
thank you for your time again today.
That feeling is mutual, my friend. Let me know what else I can do to help you out.
Thanks. Let's bring this to a close,
All right.
and I will be talking to you soon.
Sounds great.